Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, I should say. I'm Muriel Bowser. I'm the mayor of Washington, D.C. Today, I am providing a situational update to the residents of the District of Columbia on two important topics, the district's response to COVID-19 and the district's preparation for the 59th presidential inauguration of Joseph Biden and the inauguration of Vice President Kamala Harris. We will also plan to have a future briefing on presidential inauguration activities in the district. Of course, exactly 1 week ago, there was a violent insurrection at the Capitol of the United States that has impacted the way we are approaching working with our federal partners and planning for the 59th inauguration. We have asked Americans not to come to the Washington, D.C. event, but instead to participate virtually. And we know that is the right choice and the best way to keep everyone safe. On Monday, I shared with you some of the asks that I've made of the federal government, and I will just briefly state where we are with those asks. On Monday, I requested, as you recall, that the President declare a pre-emergency declaration for the District of Columbia. And on Monday, that declaration was declared. We also requested that the Department of Homeland Security extend the National Special Security Event period, and they have done that. That period now starts today instead of on the 19th as it was originally planned. We asked DHS to coordinate with the Department of Defense, the Department of Justice, the United States Congress, and the United States Supreme Court to establish a security and federal force deployment plan for all federal property. You have heard various announcements from those agencies about the stepped-up deployment and security plan that will be, as all special security events are, led by the United States Secret Service. And as we will, you also recall that I asked the Acting Attorney General to direct the FBI to provide an intelligence and threat briefing on a daily basis throughout the special security event time period, which is ongoing. And I also requested that the Secretary of the Department of the Interior cancel any and all public gathering permits in the District of Columbia and deny any future applications during the special event period. Those discussions we continue with the Department of the Interior. On Monday, I also extended the pause that we announced just before the Christmas holiday, or I called it the holiday pause, and this will extend through the inaugural period. So certain phase 2 activities related to our COVID response remain paused through Friday, January 22nd at 5 a.m. And during this time, we are asking residents to avoid our central business district and only travel to the central business district if you have essential business. Yesterday, if you were downtown or around the Capitol, you likely noticed the additional preparations which have begun, and that includes around the inauguration perimeter, the White House, the mall, the Capitol, and other key parts of downtown. Individuals entering the perimeter may be subject to screening and asked to describe their essential business, so be prepared to do that. We also want to amplify this information that we received from the Secret Service beginning 6 a.m. on Friday the 15th. All parking garages in the restricted zones will be blocked off. Any vehicles still in the garage or loading zone at 6 a.m. Friday must be remain there until after the inauguration. So plan to move your vehicles. Businesses that need to receive deliveries will be advised of an off-site screening facility. Further, residents and businesses between 19th to 14th Streets Northwest and K Street to Constitution Avenue are already being advised of these restrictions. So more information about additional closures will be forthcoming. While we know this is very inconvenient for our residents and businesses, I want to say thank you for your cooperation and flexibility. Clearly, we are in uncharted waters, and it is very important that we work with all of our partners to secure these events and secure these parts of our city. Certainly this time last year, we didn't expect to be in this situation. Even last week, we didn't expect to be starting this early. So we want to advise neighbors to please follow for updates. And information can change, so it's important to have these updates. So text INAUG 2021, INAUG 2021 to 888-777 to get the latest updates from DC government. Further, as we've said and we've seen, this year, we've had to do some extraordinary things to keep people safe as it relates to COVID and public safety. We just showed an example of what it looks like when people do these things voluntarily. At Times Square, just this past New Year's Eve, we got to celebrate with the ball dropping, mostly virtually, as New York City secured the perimeter around the normal square of festivities. We're asking people to do the same thing as it relates to the inauguration, for Americans to enjoy it virtually and to follow the instructions of the Presidential Inauguration Committee, the Secret Service, and all of us. So now, before we take questions, I want to say something briefly about vaccinations, and Dr. Nesbitt will be available to answer questions. We were very excited to see so many of DC seniors sign up for the available vaccination doses that we have this week. And because of that, that desire to get inoculated from this virus and get back to their lives, the 6,700 appointments we had available for this week were all filled up by midday on Monday when they became available. In one sense, that's a good thing, but it also demonstrates the scarcity of the vaccine. So I want to advise everyone that you should not go to a vaccine site if you do not have an appointment. Obviously, crowding is not good now, and it will not help you get an appointment. Instead, you should go to Vaccinate.dc.gov to register or to receive an alert, or call for an appointment when appointments become available again, and we will continue to make that phone number available. We are making appointments as the district receives doses from the federal government. Dr. Nesbitt mentioned already that we may be able to make additional appointments from seniors in the previous group who was in 1A later in the week, and we will continue to advise you of that. Okay, so with that, we'll take your questions. Yes, sir.
Yeah, for Dr. Nesbitt, are vaccinators required to collect data on race of people who they vaccinate? And if so, will that data be made publicly available like Maryland and Virginia?
Sure. We plan to make that data available. I think we mentioned to you all last week that as we were working with our vaccine providers to improve their reporting, we wanted to ensure that as we make that data available, we would be able to do it without so many caveats in terms of what percentage of the data was missing or was not accurate. Last week on Friday, I issued an administrative order to clarify that all vaccine providers in the district must report an administered dose within 24 hours of it being administered. Since the issuance of that order, we have had improved reporting from our vaccine providers, so we hope to be able to make that data available to you all soon. We've seen remarkable improvement. The two providers where we don't still have timely reporting into the district's immunization information system with the demographic information that we need are the two providers that are part of the federal long-term care partnership, which is currently CVS and Walgreens. So we'll continue to work with them to get that timely reporting into our system.
So the vaccinators are required to
That is
report?
correct.
Okay.
It is a requirement as part of the provider agreements that they sign with us to collect data on race, ethnicity, age, gender, key demographic information that is critical for us to be able to understand if there are racial and ethnic disparities in terms of access to the vaccine, as well as in terms of uptake to the vaccine to help us with better equitable distribution, as well as messaging in terms of reaching the most vulnerable populations.
Thank you. And then can you explain the district's rationale for going straight to vaccinating people who are 65 and older when Maryland and Virginia have the age set at 75 and older?
Sure. So there are a couple things that I think people should know is that there's the CDC has an advisory committee for immunization practices that deliberated looking at data, national data, in terms of the populations that had the greatest risk for morbidity and mortality or risk of illness, severe illness and death from COVID-19. When reviewing that data, it was found that individuals, when looking at national data over 75, had a greater risk in terms of hospitalization, severe illness, and death. When we look at our data in the District of Columbia, and when we looked at our population in terms of the number of individuals in our population by certain age groups, we made the decision to lower that age to 65 to be able to have a plan that made sense for us locally. And now that group is a sizable group, 86,000 individuals. But in terms of how we're rolling out our phases, we thought it made sense for us in terms of the morbidity and mortality we're seeing as low as the age of 65, given the disproportionate disease burden in certain racial and ethnic groups for individuals at that age level.
Thank you.
James?
Dr. Nesbitt, on January the 21st, Johnson & Johnson will go before the FDA in terms of getting its emergency authorization. The difference between Johnson & Johnson and the other two, and you probably know this, is that it's a single-shot vaccine. How would that fit into the mix in terms of what you have here now in the district?
Wonderful. Excellent question. Before I answer that question, I will make sure to remind people, we want you to get the vaccines that are currently available. So we hope and are optimistic that people are not anticipating the approval of any specific vaccine or waiting for any particular vaccine to receive approval in the U.S. So if your group is eligible for vaccination, we want you to move forward with vaccination. Our plan and what we know is that there are several types of vaccines or vaccine providers or companies, drug companies, pharmaceutical companies who have products under development, who plan to submit to the FDA for approval for use in the U.S. So as our vaccine programs in the U.S. mature, we hope to have more vaccines available for use in our programs. The two that are currently available are mRNA vaccines that have storage requirements. One has to be at ultra cold storage temperatures below 90. The other one still has to be stored at cold temperatures, not as cold. And they have to be thawed, and once they are thawed, the whole vial has to be used within 6 hours. The other vaccines, as we understand them, do not have some of these same storage requirements, whether they can be administered with 1 dose or 2. So as we learn more about the effectiveness of those vaccines, how well they do at preventing COVID-19, how well they may do at preventing people from transmitting the virus and preventing the disease, we'll be able to talk more openly about them. But people should not wait on a vaccine to be approved in terms of whether or not you need 1 dose or 2 and things of that nature.
Thank you.
Yes,
Hi,
Amanda?
thank you for holding this presser. So seniors reported not receiving alerts via email and text message. Some also reported some glitches to the site. Is the agency addressing those issues, and should seniors expect the website to change at all when vaccination appointments open up possibly later in the week?
Sure. We received lots of feedback on the process. We were anticipating receiving feedback on the process. I actually went out in the field yesterday to a number of the sites to be able to speak to seniors beyond what we received via email, what was provided to us by constituents, and what we've heard from you all as reporters. All of it is great feedback for us to share with our Chief Technology Office, who is working with the developers of the system and the tool to be able to resolve these issues permanently before the system opens back up for individuals to make appointments, to ensure that alerts go out timely when the next appointments are available. We also will be, again, relying very heavily on all of you because many of our community members watch your morning, noon, afternoon, evening coverage and read your papers and your blogs to be able to understand when new appointments will be released. We do hear that some people had challenges receiving the alerts when they signed up for the alerts, so we have worked to remedy that issue. But we also want to make very clear that people who access the system prior to Monday, who believe that they were registered for an appointment, were not registered. We've communicated that a number of times. We want to make sure that they clearly understand that. So we've heard feedback that some people who went on weeks prior when the system were open for healthcare workers, some seniors did that, and they were expecting to receive something from us that would automatically schedule them for an appointment. That was never going to happen. So people need to be very, very clear on that. There was also, the system should have eliminated the ability for people to complete the questionnaire that is part of the registration system when there were no more appointments available. So anyone who completed the questionnaire that asks for your name, your address, whether you're a DC resident, what type of work you do, all those questions, if you completed all of that and you did not get an appointment, you are not registered, you have not been scheduled for vaccination, you don't have a confirmation code. None of that is complete. So when we reopen the system for appointments, you will have to do all of that over again. So the way the system should work is you should not be able to do any of that when there are no appointments. So that's one of the other things that we're working to fix. So I want to stress very much so to everyone, if you've been in the system and you did not get a date, time, and location for an appointment, you will need to go back in the system. I understand that that is a burden for people, and we don't want it to be a burden for people, so the system will cut off and not allow you to do that when there are no more appointments in the future. So if you all could really help us message to members of the public that if you never received a date, time, location, then you are not registered for an appointment, and the health department or any entity of the government will not be automatically sending you an appointment when new appointments are available.
And
Thank you
Dr.
for that.
Nesbitt, could you talk about the providers who are reaching out to their patients?
Sure. So we have a number of our health systems who have vaccine, who take care of individuals over the age of 65. They are reaching out to anyone who's been to their health system over the past 2 years to invite you to come and receive the vaccine within their health system. And that began this week as well. So in addition to having access to vaccines through Vaccinate.dc.gov, we have several seniors, many seniors in our community, in the hundreds and thousands, who are receiving vaccines in the district's local health systems. So so that includes, when I say health systems, I mean like Kaiser, GW, Johns Hopkins, Sibley, who are reaching out to United Medical Center, who are reaching out to their patients, and they are receiving vaccines there. And I was able to go to some of those sites yesterday, and see patients in the United Medical Center system coming in for patients in their clinics yesterday.
And two more just questions about the vaccine, if I may. How are you ensuring that like internet savvy seniors don't book up all 6,000 appointments? Are you like reserving some for the call center and then others for the website? And another question is, how are you accounting for homebound seniors?
Sure. So the homebound seniors gets a little bit tricky, and I've received emails about this as well and calls about this, and we've discussed this with our colleagues in other cities. There are some limitations when we talk about homebound seniors in terms of who we will be able to reach with these two vaccines because of their storage and handling requirements. And I've even shared the healthcare provider administration sheets that are part of the FDA EUA approval with some people because I'm really trying to get them to understand why we have certain limitations. We can reach some homebound seniors if they are in large venues where a large number of them can be vaccinated in the same day. We cannot administer them in sort of these traditional private physician house call programs where a physician goes and vaccinates one homebound senior living in a private residence at a time because the vaccine cannot be properly stored and handled by a physician who works that way. So the ones where, like senior living communities where large numbers of seniors live in a single community or property and large numbers, we'll be able to establish a proper program to be able to do that with the proper storage and handling of the vaccine where we don't have waste. But for a physician who runs a house call program going to a homebound senior, we will have some challenges. One of the ways to be able to reduce risk of exposure for a 100% homebound senior who cannot leave their home to go to a vaccination site is to have their caregivers vaccinated, their healthcare workers and caregivers healthcare workers who are caregivers were eligible for vaccination very early on, and that's how that has been addressed. In terms of whether or not there is a competitive advantage for people calling in over the phone versus homebound seniors, the call takers access the portal and make the appointment. So it's essentially having someone assist you with going through the internet process. And we have bolstered the number of people who are working in the call center to assist people in making their appointments through the portal.
How many is that? Just
I don't have the number offhand, but we've doubled the number of people working in the call center.
thank you.
Okay.
It's not negligible, to be sure.
Mark?
Thank you. If I could go back to the order that you issued to the providers requiring them to report demographics, does that also require them to report wastage numbers as well?
To be clear, the provider agreement is what establishes the requirements for what they must report to us in terms of all of the data elements. And then the timeliness by which they have to report is what's in the administrative order.
Does that include wastage?
The administrative order does not include waste. We can get you a copy of the administrative order.
And then, so you mentioned that CVS and Walgreens were the two providers who you were having trouble getting information from. Can you expand upon that? I mean, do you have recourse with them if they continue to not report?
So the challenge that we are having is that there is a federal partnership for to vaccinate residents in long-term care facilities. And the pharmacies set up these clinics, and they have to report into local, state and local immunization information management systems. But there seems to be this dynamic in which they feel as if they are in a federal partnership and they have federal requirements to meet versus having to comply with local requirements to report into local systems. The requirement is to report into local systems. However, it is referred to as a federal partnership. So this was presented to all of the states as if we opted into a federal partnership to have our long-term care residents and their employees vaccinated, then CVS and Walgreens, and there's a third pharmacy that is not in our region, would have their pharmacists vaccinate all of our residents, deal with the scheduling of the clinics, on-site clinics for us, et cetera. So it's a very good option for us because it adds workforce and it does it on-site. Now we're having operational challenges in terms of the doses for this came out of our doses that we were allocated. For us, it's about 10% of what we've been allocated so far because we haven't put more vaccine into it. Some states, it's about has been as high as 20 to 30%, if not more, of their vaccine so far, and you can't get your vaccine back from them. So we have a little bit of a challenge with getting directly from them how much has been administered. We have found a workaround where it seems that they are reporting some things into a federal system that we then have to go and comb through to try to patch together some data and information. But it is not integrated into our system where we run analytics. Okay,
Thank you.
next question.
I have two questions, inauguration related, one for the mayor, one for the chief. My question, inauguration related, is I wondered if you could go into a little more detail of your talks with Department of Interior about the public gathering permits. My understanding is First Amendment concerns are potentially a sticking point, and then also, isn't the inauguration itself done by permits, so wouldn't that create a thorny issue of canceling all of them, but not that?
We have had that same conversation with the Department of the Interior. I think it's fair to say that the secretary is very concerned about his ability to approve or disapprove certain permits. We continue to ask them to look at the public gatherings where there are people. We encourage them to work with the Presidential Inauguration Committee as well, and also to look to the DC experience because we have denied gathering permits throughout the response to COVID, and we know that we have the authority to do that because they pose a public health threat. So that conversation is ongoing.
All right, my question for Acting Chief Conte is, there's been so much talk about potential trouble this weekend throughout the whole country. How concerned are you about this weekend versus Inauguration Day and right around Inauguration Day?
I remain concerned. I've been concerned before today and will be through this weekend and beyond. I think that the mayor has been very clear in terms of the district's posture and response. We take this seriously. And as the mayor has encouraged residents, as she has encouraged visitors from around the country, we're not asking people to come to DC for this. There's a major security threat, and we are working to mitigate those threats. So again, we are just very intently focused on the job that's at hand.
Obviously, you're new as acting chief, but not new with MPD. Have you ever seen this much help coming in for a large event?
Not at this level, no.
Yes.
Just a couple of questions here, one for the chief and one for the mayor about the inauguration. One, how many National Guardsmen will officially be in the area? We're just getting a couple of conflicting reports. And I'll throw this out there too. Mayor Bowser, recent reports show that you were just the target of an attack on January 6th. That just came out today based on some court records. One, do you have any plans to beef up the security around for yourself? And two, can you just comment on the fact that there has been a threat against you?
I'm going to ask the chief to comment.
Sure.
The chief's responsible for my security.
Sure. Absolutely. Thank you for the questions. The first one with respect to the National Guard. Those numbers, the final numbers, because this has been designated as a national special security event, the final numbers will be provided from the United States Secret Service. I think you can expect to see somewhere upwards beyond 20,000 members of the National Guard that will be here in the footprint of the District of Columbia. With response to the mayor's security, obviously the Metropolitan Police Department and me personally, we're responsible for that, but we do not discuss the specifics of the mayor's of her security detail. Thank you.
Okay, Michael?
Mayor Bowser, in addition to what you've already proposed in terms of planning for the inauguration, there's also been some other pretty extreme measures that have been floated. Governor Hogan alluded to stopping Metro service and a broader DC lockdown. We've also heard about restrictions on hotels and even stopping Amtrak service. Are there any updates on these measures or anything else you're considering?
Michael, thank you for that question. And we should ask DC residents to expect some impacts to transportation. That includes Metro, that in addition to the roadway closures or perimeters that have been set up in DC, the service may recommend some other changes to the transportation network system, including roads around the city. And when those things have been determined, we will let you know. That is not, to use the overused word, that is not unprecedented. In the planning for the first Obama inauguration, for example, there were, I would say that our law enforcement was responding to a couple of things in that case, as you all know. It was historic inauguration, over 1 million people attended, so there was a huge public safety issue with just the sheer numbers. And I also think there was a high level of threat against the incoming president. So there were a lot of different transportation impacts in and around DC, to include transportation, to include approaches to the district as well.
And how about hotels?
The hotels we are working with, our hotels are very concerned. First of all, those that are in the perimeter will have some access concerns. There are some safety concerns for their personnel as well. We will have a lot of people in town just supporting the security apparatus, and so we are trying to understand and balance the need for housing with also our encouragement that people not travel here. So we haven't made any determinations yet, but we're trying to give a lot of advice to our hotel operators. I think prior to the 6th, there were a couple of hotels that decided to close their operations for the safety of their personnel and the integrity of their business operation. I think you'll see some hotels do that. I think before I came in, I saw a notice from Airbnb that it would limit its bookings. So I think there are going to be there may not be a one-size-fits-all approach to that question.
Okay, but there might be an update later.
There could be an update.
Okay. And then, per your request to the Department of Interior regarding the gathering permits, you talked about public health as one reason those will be prohibited, but how do you balance that with Americans' guaranteed First Amendment right to gather and protest?
Well, Michael, as you know, we have dealt with this question throughout our response to the pandemic. We have not issued any special permits from the district for parades, for block parties, for anything that would encourage people to gather, even outside on the street. We have no ability to say to somebody, you can't have a protest. As I have been roundly criticized as if I issued permits for protests throughout the summer. We never did. But we also know that is, we can't stop it with a local ordinance or mayor's order.
And then following up on the question about the threat you received, can you go into any more details? Have you received any other threats of that nature? How many have you gotten, and how are you dealing with them?
I really don't have more to say, Michael, than what the chief said around how we deal with them. I will say I get threats a lot. I don't know the number off the top. And if MPD thinks that it's actionable, then they will implement whatever measures they think are necessary.
And then a question for Chief Conte. Are there any updates on MPD's investigation into Brian Sicknick's death?
No public updates at this point. Again, he was taken to our DC Office of the Medical Examiner. A autopsy was conducted there, but no other updates for the public at this point, other than what we've already presented.
Okay, thank you. And then one last question from me, Mayor Bowser.
Yes.
The eyes of the country are on DC right now and probably through the inauguration. And you've made frequent national TV appearances. Some of your recent news conferences have been broadcast nationally as well. What do you see as your responsibility and goals as DC's mayor in addressing a national audience?
Well, my first responsibility is to address DC residents and businesses and our DC audience, and that's my first responsibility. I do feel a responsibility to also communicate directly with the American people. I have things that are within my direct authority, as granted to me by DC residents and our home rule charter. But the larger role I have is to convene people, bring people to the table, people for whom I have no direct authority. But I'm using my power as mayor of the best city in the world to convene people and to make sure that every piece of information I have that I can share. So that includes our federal partners, and that I know that term can be kind of amorphous in a way. So that's the administration, that's political officials, that's regional officials, and that's our own local stakeholders as well, and it's our residents and businesses.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mark.
One for Mayor Bowser and one for the chief. Mayor, are you satisfied? You put a lot of requests to the federal government. Some of them they have agreed to, some they haven't. Are you satisfied with the level of coordination right now between the local and the federal planning of this, particularly when it comes to notifying residents? I get that it's a fluid issue and whatnot, but just are you satisfied with the coordination and the notification to the local public with all the closures and restrictions that are going into place? You know, people drove into, I mean, you saw what happened with everybody trying to get here this morning, you know, what it's like getting around the city. I'm just wondering if you think the coordination is to your liking.
I think the advance notice part of things, Mark, we typically would do differently, but I realized that that type of notice would be impossible this time when I asked for the National Special Security Event time period to be extended. And it may not be clear what that means. The events of January 6th, the insurrection of the Capitol, those protests did not fall into a national special event category. The inauguration of the president does, which puts in place an entirely different command and control structure within the federal government. So we are very confident about that type of coordination, as we have been with other national special security events. It's a whole different structure in extending the time period so that that structure could be in place earlier in case of the threats that we have heard from the FBI's bulletin about these protests starting earlier and starting at locations all around the country. I think we will benefit from that.
And Chief, if I could, an off-topic question unrelated to the inauguration, but your department released very interesting data on carjackings comparing 2019 to 2020. And the spike in carjackings is remarkable, more than 140% increase over 2019. And if you break it down by ward, and you look at Ward 7, or I guess police district, if you look at the 7D numbers compared to 2D, it's really off the charts. And we're getting reports that there may have been somebody carjacked on Military Road yesterday at Rifle Point, and then in Georgetown on 30th Street, there were multiple in the same day. What can you tell us is going on and your advice to people to stay safe?
Yeah, we've had a number of carjackings in years. Thank you for the question, Mark. And I think it's important for the public to be aware of that. Some of the carjackings that we have had we're seeing as a result of people who are leaving their cars running or delivering food, that kind of thing. But the ones that really scare people, you know, like the ones that we've had the other day, the 1500 block of 30th Street and some of those others, I'm at least happy to report in those cases that there has been an arrest for those 3 cases, and we're seeking several other arrests related to that. They were found later on by 5th District officers after they committed the robberies over there. But just in general, I think from a law enforcement standpoint that one of the things that I intend to do is really kind of develop a task force with our federal partners to really take a different approach to carjackings. I think that the public certainly has to be aware of it, but I think with respect to how we approach it with our prosecutors, et cetera, there's not 100 people that are out here committing carjackings. I think that there is a defined group of people that are out here doing it, and I think that we need to be very focused, that we need to be very intentional on focusing on those individuals and bringing them to justice for the crimes that they've committed.
Is there a specific time of day? Is there a specific cars that they're looking for? Is it just completely random? And
It's really all over the map. It literally is all over the map. And I remember back in my career many years ago, we saw an increase in carjackings, and then there was some, I think, legislation or something that was passed that, you know, made the criminal offense, made it a crime of violence, an enhanced penalty if a firearm was used in it, and so forth. And I think we really need to kind of look at what we currently have to make sure that that works for us, and from a legislative standpoint, but also from a focused law enforcement point, make sure that we're leveraging all the resources that we have to address the issue, and really focusing again on the individuals that we believe are responsible for these carjackings in our city.
I appreciate that. And Mayor Bowser, if I could just squeeze one last question off topic to you. It was announced today that WAMU is ending the Kojo Nambi show after decades of service. Just your thoughts on Kojo's place in this city and what he's done for our community, and whether or not you'll miss the questioning that goes on his show. I know you've been a frequent guest.
Well, sometimes when people tell me that they are retiring, my first question is why? Because Kojo has certainly earned a restful and peaceful retirement. I understood from what I read that he would continue to do the politics hour. I hope that's true. And I think Kojo has a unique way of asking questions. His questions are insightful, and they are direct, and they get to the bottom of the issue in a way that has not only informed but entertained his listeners for many, many years. So when I frequently will call Kojo or the show and ask him, can we come on, and when we have a lot of issues to talk about, because he lets us talk and talk about the issues that are important from our perspective in the administration. He also lets his analyst and himself ask tough questions, but he always reserves time for people to call in, so you can hear directly from the people, and they can hear directly from you. And so I just think that's an incredible format. The residents of the district and the entire region will miss that on a daily basis, but we will look forward to the politics hour.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll take one more sweep around. Amanda?
Thank you. So while we didn't report as many cases today, thank goodness, DC did report, I believe, the most cases in a single day during the pandemic yesterday at 430. So I wonder what you're seeing, what you attribute this to. I know health experts warned that the Capitol insurrection could have been a possible super spreading event. And then a second question on that point, House aide tells me Capitol testing through the Office of Attending Physician is reported to DC Health. Can you confirm that?
So, a couple things. I think it's a little premature for us to suggest that the acts, the heinous acts of last week are contributing to the increase in cases that we're seeing here in the District of Columbia. People should be mindful that many of the individuals who came here do not reside here and have gone back to their home jurisdictions. Now, it is feasible and possible that they had interaction with our residents and maybe could have contributed in that way. It could be, a week or 2 or 3 weeks more from last week when they were in our city before we see the consequences of that. And we've always communicated and articulated to people to be thoughtful from that. We are seeing from folks who have complied or participated in the contact tracing process that from 2 weeks ago, about 12% of people reported a history of travel in the 2 weeks before they were diagnosed, and last week it was 18%. So just thinking through sort of that we may be in this period of time where people who had non-essential travel or travel related to the holidays, the Christmas and New Year holiday season, we may be seeing some of that manifest in the district. So we're keeping our eye on that. I think the swift actions that the mayor took to have the holiday pause could help us hopefully stay in this place and not go up any higher. These are also the highest 7-day daily case rates that we've experienced in the district as well. But we'll have to see what plays out over time. So it is critically important that we have residents continue to be mindful of where we are in terms of our current cases, our hospital capacity, and that if they are considering hosting people who may want to come into town, that they are heeding the advice of the mayor and the request of the mayor to not do that.
And then the second question, I just wanted to confirm, does capital testing, I believe it's through the Office of Attending Physician, is that reported
So
to?
all tests are required to be reported to us. How those cases are counted and where they are counted still can be contingent on the individual state of residence. So it's important to be mindful of that. But we've always had great cooperation and collaboration with the Office of the Attending Physician in terms of contact tracing and the reporting of cases.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, sir?
The Airbnb decision, was that something that they consulted with your office on? Has there been communication between your office and
We
Airbnb?
have.
And what is your reaction to the decision?
We have had communication with them. We had communication with them last week as well. I think they've called various agencies, including MPD and probably all in our kind of public safety realm. And while I don't think we told them that this was the action that they should take, I can understand it, and we will continue to work with our residents who have questions. Yes, sir, James.
Mayor Bowser, Dr. Nesbitt, it is noted that you all are wearing red on this particular day. My question is to Chief Conte. On January the 21st, it's supposed to be a march of reparations. Can you tell us anything about that? Or what you know about it, the security setup, et cetera?
Yeah, we're working on the whole footprint for inauguration, for the reparations, for the Right to Life March, which is right after that. All these things are on the radar, but we're intently focused right now for these next couple of days, specifically on inauguration, while doing some planning for those other things. MPD will have the appropriate posture for that to facilitate the First Amendment assembly that will take place. And then we'll evaluate, obviously, any threats that we receive for either one of the marches that are scheduled in the city, as we always do.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
Dr. Nesbitt, yesterday Maryland confirmed that 2 individuals in the state had the new strain of coronavirus. Between that and just the number of unmasked individuals who have been and probably will be traveling into the city, seems like it's only a matter of time before the new strain makes its way to the district. How concerned are you about this new strain, and what might that look like in the future for the district? I mean, what kind of lockdowns would we need in order to mitigate the spread of this just so much more infectious strain of the virus? Could we see us reverting to a stance that we had in the spring when we first entered the pandemic?
Well, I think you've heard Dr. Fauci and all public health experts state, and I completely agree with them, that we are going to see this variant in all of the states and jurisdictions of this country. DC will be no exception to that. It's not a matter of if, but when. And having now seen 2 cases in Maryland, it's a matter of detecting it in the District of Columbia when, right? It's possible that it is already here, and we have not seen it through our whole genome sequencing yet. So, when you talk about what things need to be done, I'm not a fan of the lockdown. We are not doing anything to incarcerate or imprison people. We are asking people to be mindful of their activities, and we implement non-pharmaceutical interventions that help us to get the most impact out of a reduced transmission. What we talk about with these variants is that they have a higher R0 or rate of transmission. It's one of the things that we document or we show you all in our daily metrics. And it is higher with this variant than it is with other ones. And so one of the ways that there became an increasing suspicion that you have a variant circulating in your jurisdiction or your community or your country is that your rate of transmission begins to increase and at a rate faster than what you were experiencing before. So even if you don't have whole genome sequencing available, or if you have whole genome sequencing available in your jurisdiction, but you're not doing testing a lot of cases, or running whole genome sequencing on a lot of your laboratory specimens, having an increased rate of transmission or R0 could be an indication that that variant is present. So again, I subscribe to that it's not a matter of if you're going to detect it, but when. So we want people to, again, be wearing their mask, keeping 6 feet of distance from folks, washing their hands, and being very judicious about the activities that they participate in. And our greatest vulnerabilities are people getting together, keeping their guard down when they're in households that are not their own, and not thinking that they need to continue to protect themselves. We also need to be mindful. There's a lot of conversation that I hear amongst my colleagues, people in public health, and even folks who are out getting vaccinated, that once you get your 2 doses and you wait a week or 2, you can be a lot more relaxed with the use of your mask. It's simply not true, okay? The effectiveness of these vaccines are about the ability to reduce your risk of developing COVID-19, the disease. We don't yet know a lot about your ability to still acquire the virus and transmit the virus to other people. So we need to continue to wait until more data is out about that before we can create this conception that people can stop wearing their mask after they've been fully inoculated and are developing the antibodies and things of that nature. Now, we believe that that is what is happening, that either if you still acquire the virus, you have so little virus in your body that you won't spread it to other people, but we still want to wait until we have good science to make us comfortable knowing that that is true.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Oh, you had one follow-up?
Oh, I would just say, just kind of looking at Britain as a case study, are the current mitigative measures that the district has in place to prevent the spread of the virus enough to keep the new strain from just exploding through the district, or will there have to be additional measures in place to keep just, it spreading out of control?
Well, our process has been, and it will continue to be, that we have a layered approach. We can dial things up and we can dial things down as we see fit. We'll continue to observe. The mayor has made the decision with our input that we will continue our pause through this period of time that we are in this additional emergency through the 24th, and we'll continue to observe our trends through that time.
Thank you.
Wrap it up. Thank you.